In this video, we'll talk about cartilaginous joints. Now, not surprisingly, given the name, these joints contain cartilage. So in this case, the articulated bones is cartilaginous joints. Cartilage is in the joint itself. So they're held together by cartilage. Now, they do not have a joint cavity. So that means these are going to be limited in their motion. So either little or no motion. So when I'm looking at a true cartilaginous joint, I'm either looking at a basically one that doesn't move or only just barely moves. All right, so there's two types we can look at. Syncrosis is one, and the other is symphysis. And let's have a look. So let's look at the first type. Now, one example of this would be the epiphyseal plates, which we looked at. Remember that had hyaline cartilage that connects the diaphysis to the epiphysis of the developing long bones. Now, of course, this doesn't move, and this was hyaline cartilage. Now, there's a couple other places that the place of the first, where the first rib meets the sternum. So between the first rib and the sternum, we have the sternocostal. Okay, sternocostal, that tells us between the sternum and costo, it means ribs. Okay, that is another example of this type of joint. And we also have the costochondral joints also. And we'll have a look at those a bit later on. And now what does this do? Why is that first rib so important? Well, think about it. When you breathe, your whole rib cage moves up and out, especially if you breathe deeper. And so by having the top rib, which is rib number one, really firmly fixed to the sternum, it gives a firm foundation that the other ribs, because there's little muscles that run between the various ribs at different levels, when they contract, it basically gives them a really firm foundation that they can pull against. So rib number one is highly stabilized because of the type of material that we see in that joint in terms of its attachment to the sternum. Okay, so let's have a look, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about right up here. You can see that first rib is really fixed. Now, by the way, the rest of the ribs are a different type of joint, which allows them more movement. They can actually move, and there's, as I said, there's muscles located between here, and when they contract, they pull the ribs up, and especially the lower ones out a bit. And if the first rib, was very loose in terms of attachment, the contraction wouldn't have that firm foundation. All right. We also talked about the epiphyseal plate. Now, let's have a look. So when we're talking about the area between the ribs and the sternum, we have to realize that there's functionally two joints here. There is the joint here and the attachment here also. So the costochondral joints, whenever I say that costo tells me ribs, chondral tells me it's basically connective tissue. So those are the costochondral joints right there. And then we have the sternochondral joints is where it actually joins the sternum. So it seems a little unusual that this seems like just one joint, but functionally we consider these two ends slightly differently. By the way, since we're here, we can see a very good view of this structure, which is part of the sternum, and that's the area called the manubrium, and the body of the sternum is right there. Okay, in terms of symphysis is a fibrocartilage. And if we notice something about all these symphyses, that they really fall midline. The intervertebral joints, that's the joint between the two vertebrae. And this is how I always remember symphysis. Symphyses are always exactly midline. So the joints between the various vertebra are a symphysis, and the pubic symphysis is between the pubic bones at the front where they join. And this is a type of fibrocartilage, and it's a pad of fibrocartilage, and it's amphiarthrosis. Okay, and go back, and if you don't remember these names, go back and review them. All right, and we can see it here, is that when we're looking at the symphysis, here is the pubic symphysis down here, and of course the blue represents the pads that are between the bony parts of the vertebrae. So that is the intervertebral joints, and the pubic symphysis is up here. And these two are the two symphysis joints we will look at. Okay, you can read about the epiphyseal fracture. Now we're going to end the video here, and the next video will come back and talk about synovial joints.